Hello, everybody. This is the Fights Tonight podcast. I am Travis Polhamus, joined by my blue belt co-host Luis Romero. Luis, how you doing?
Good. How you doing, Travis?
Doing pretty good. Glad that we get another back-to-back weeks of fights. Um, this one obviously nowhere near the size of that 276, which was the International Fight Week card, but still got some fights on here that should be good.
Right. Who do we have on the prelims?
Well, to start it off, in the bantamweight division, we have Ronnie Lawrence, who is 8-1, versus Said Yokap Kakramanov. Hoping I said that right. At least I'm thinking I'm close. He's 9-2. Both guys with pretty impressive records for bantamweight. Got a weird bit of trivia on these two. Ronnie Lawrence, for whatever reason, I feel like stands out to me a little bit more. Maybe it's just because of name recognition, although the other guys definitely got the more unique name. But both have had one fight in the UFC and won it. Oddly enough, Ronnie Lawrence was supposed to have a second fight before this against Trevin Jones. The fight ended up being scratched. I believe Ronnie Lawrence had to pull out. I don't know if it was an injury or COVID, and it was his opponent Said Yokap who filled in on short notice and beat Trevin Jones.
Oh wow.
So they have a bit of history there where one guy dropped out of a fight and the other guy was able to get his debut in the UFC, taking that fight. Both of them won their only fight in the UFC. Um, Obviously, neither one is too highly ranked, but both of them I was pretty impressed with the little bit I saw of them. Ronnie Lawrence had some decent strikes, was pretty quick. Obviously, Said Yokap is a little more well-rounded, seemed like a little bit more of a grappling base. But Trevin Jones was a tough fight and is really impressive to come in your debut and beat him. Um, this is one, I'm pretty 50-50 on. A little bit of it is just them not having a whole lot of high-level film on them.
Right.
I think I'm gonna go with Kakramanov on this one. I'm just expecting him to be a little bit more well-rounded, but I wouldn't be shocked if Ronnie Lawrence got another finish and trying to get his name out there at bantamweight while the title changes hands in the top 5. Um, that brings us to a light heavyweight bout between Kennedy Nchukwu versus Carl Roberson. Uh, Kennedy, of course, had that win over Adesanya's teammate, kind of a come-from-behind win. Carl Roberson's been going back and forth a bit from light heavyweight to middleweight. Fought Glover Teixeira and has had maybe a little bit more high-profile fights. He hasn't fared too well in them, but bouncing around different weight classes is definitely tough. He seems like he's trying to stay at light heavyweight now. This one I think's got a good chance for being a knockout or a fight of the night. Both guys come and really bring it. Neither one's really looking to grapple too much. Um, Even though Roberson's faced the higher level of competition, Kennedy's really durable. And I was really impressed with his fight against Adesanya's teammate, the way he hung in there and basically just let the other guy gas him out, teeing off. I think Nchukwu takes this one, but wouldn't be shocked if Robertson gets it. This one's really got a lot of even fights on it. You got any thoughts on that one, Lou?
Hmm. Carl Robertson, yeah, a hell of a guy, man. He has a really strong right cross. He's really good. I'm just kidding. Right now I don't know anything about these fighters. I'm trying to keep up and pull shit out of my ass so I can get these pictures up, and I'm so far behind. But I have no thoughts on this. But I will share the picture of since I'm not fast enough to keep all the other ones up. That's the bad thing about doing this without doing like some type of Photoshop. Trying to keep it all at once. But let me see. Let me move this around and let me show people Kennedy's face. Huh? How about I do that?
Yeah,
And how do you pronounce his name? Nwaksha?
it's Nchukwu.
The True Crew. All right. So this
Yeah.
is the True Crew right here, and this is who Travis is siding with for this fight. Who's the fight after this, Travis?
The fight after this is a featherweight bout between David Onama, who's 9-1, and Garrett Armfield, who's 8-2. Garrett Armfield, just getting his first shot in the UFC. There might be one other guy, but I believe he is the only one that's like making his debut on here. He's an American guy, fights out of that Kansas, Missouri region, which has produced a lot of really good fighters lately, like Anthony Smith. Definitely is kind of up against it though a little bit for his first fight. He's 8-2. He's fighting a guy that's 9-1, which again, at the lower weight class is a real impressive record. The thing that really impressed me about Onama was him getting a win over Gabriel Benitez. He got a KO TKO in the first round. Benitez is a guy that hasn't had a lot of success only because of the guys he's been fighting have all been really good kickboxers he's had really even fights with, but he trains out of AKA like Khabib and Cormier did, and he's got like one of the strongest, nastiest body kicks I've ever seen. Like when he throws kicks, especially if it's a leg kick or a calf kick, like the noise of it's insane. He's a dude that always comes out and brawls, always looks good, and Onama beating him was really impressive. So I feel like if he could do away with a guy like that in his debut, another guy making his debut against him is going to be tough. Obviously, Armfield must be pretty impressive to have made it to this point and getting thrown in the UFC. So I can't say because of that I've seen too much of him, but this is one that I've got to go with Onama. But obviously I don't know much about his opponent Armfield aside from that he's making his debut and he's from kind of the what they call the flyover states for how boring they can be. So that's one I'm going to side with Onama on, but perhaps that is out of ignorance. That'll bring us to our next fight, which is it is Cody Brundage versus Teresa Gore. Another case of guys that kind of have a fight each. Brundage, I can say I know a little bit more about and have seen a little bit more of. I kind of am leaning towards him on this and thinking he's going to be able to come away with this one. Unfortunately, these guys at middleweight I'm not as familiar with. Definitely one we'll be staying away from on our parlay. Kind of impressive for Gore to have made it into the UFC and already had a fight with his record being 4-1. I realize middleweight isn't as stacked of a division, but anybody that's had that many of their pro fights at a high level is really impressive. That brings us to an interesting one for the women's flyweight division. Antonina Shevchenko, whose sister Valentina, of course, just defended her title in what I thought was kind of a lucky decision where she really had a tough fight against Talia Santos.
Yeah.
Shevchenko's going up against Courtney Casey. Their records, you will notice a bit of a disparity. Shevchenko's 9-4. Courtney Casey is 10-9. However, that's not rare in the women's divisions, just because there's so few of them that they end, especially ones that have been around for a while, they end up fighting a lot of their fights at a really high level. And Courtney Casey is one of those women that has fought most of the people that are in the top 10. Been in the UFC for about 6 years, I believe. Recently, she's been doing better. She's been on more of a win streak for the last couple years. Even beat Calvillo, who's fighting later on, higher up on the card. Courtney Casey, I believe, was on one of the seasons of The Ultimate Fighter. So it's nice to see that she's still out there. Shevchenko, I always kind of root for just because being, kind of a kickboxing base in MMA. I will say she does do some of the stuff that you don't want to see, where she'll throw a really cool axe kick and get taken down off it. But even though she had been having a tough run with some of the grapplers, she beat Ariane Lipski in one of her last fights. which wasn't only an impressive win, but kind of unexpected. It seemed like Lipsky should have been young enough and well-rounded enough to be able to take that fight, and Antonina looked good and used some wrestling to do it. So if she's taken her ground game more serious and could perhaps develop a top game like her sister Valentina, she could become kind of a danger in the division, which is strange, to have her fighting in the same weight class where her sister is the champion. I'm not sure what the plan is there if she were to move up.
So
But,
they are in the same weight class. I was wondering that.
yeah, yeah. Valentina used to be at 135, but then as soon as they opened up 125, she came down and kind of a bit like me and Trevor, where Shevchenko's a little bit shorter and stockier, and Antonina's a bit taller and longer. Also, a weird piece of information: the coach, Pavel, of the Shevchenko sisters, is either dating or married to Antonina. Uh,
What?
yeah, some people kind of thought that was weird to like start training somebody and eventually end up kind of marrying them or dating them. I'm sure it's not the only time it's happened, but
Right.
kind of an interesting piece of trivia there for anybody.
That's crazy.
Yeah, which is
How
also the case.
how old is
Go ahead.
Antonina? 37?
Uh, yeah,
Okay.
she's getting up there. She's the older sister.
Okay.
I believe, which is funnier, kind of like me and Trevor. She's older and taller and skinnier. So
Right.
funny how that works. So yeah, I'm not really sure. The cool thing is, she hasn't had a lot of wear and tear on her. Even the fights that she lost, it wasn't like she really took a beating. Really impressive kickboxing record. I want to say she's like 39-1 in
Gee.
kickboxing. Yeah, so really impressive, and like I say, even when she's getting taken down and losing, it's often usually a pretty cool kick. She's got nice axe kicks, and has obviously been sparring with her sister for a long time, who was a world champion in Muay Thai. So Shevchenko should win a stand-up fight, and if she's been working on her grappling and wrestling a little bit, I'd like to think that she could stuff enough of Courtney Casey's offense and come away with this fight. Maybe that's just the kickboxer in me that's leaning towards her, but I think Shevchenko might eke this one out, which I'd like to see.
Yeah, me too. With her training in Thailand, bro. I'm a
Yeah,
supporter of that. I don't know much about Courtney, but I think it's cool when you travel out of the country to go train.
yeah, and her and her sister fought out of Peru for a long time.
That's crazy. That's goals. That's what I want to do.
Yeah, yeah. So they've really traveled. I know Valentina speaks like 5 or 6 different languages. I would have to imagine her sister speaks at least a couple, living in Peru that long, and
Right.
I think speaks some English. And obviously, I don't know if Kurdish is their native language or if it's Polish. Or I know they're from Kyrgyzstan. I want to say I'm not too familiar with what their main language is over there.
Right.
Um, that brings us to our featured bout on the prelims, which is Ricky Turquoise or Turcos, 12-2, coming up against Ayman Zahabi. Turcos, a fighter that my brother and his girlfriend are really fond of. Entertaining guy, all action fighter. I believe he was on one of these recent seasons of The Ultimate Fighter. Uh, he won the one fight that he's had in the actual main UFC so far, obviously outside of Contender and Ultimate Fighter fights. Um, and he's going up against Ayman Zahabi, who, in another interesting piece of trivia, is the younger brother of Faraz Zahabi, who is GSP's longtime coach and the head trainer at TriStar Gym up in Canada.
What? How cool.
Yeah, yeah, and he's really good. You can tell that his brothers trained him well, trained with guys like GSP and Rory McDonald and all those really great fighters they have up there has really paid off. He's 8-2, and one of his he came in. I believe he had a win or two. Then around the time of the quarantine, he had a really tough loss where he went in. He was doing decent in this fight. The fight's kind of even, and then I believe it was a spin move. I want to say it was a spinning elbow that he caught, and just really messed him up. Like he just couldn't recover from it, and
Yeah.
ended up getting stopped, and did the right thing. Hopefully, listening to his brother and his coach, and took a good amount of time off.
That's what a
I
lot of
believe,
fighters don't. A lot of fighters don't do. You know, they go in there, they spar hard, they get these minor concussions or heavy concussions that add up, and
yeah,
does if you don't take time off from those fights where you're taking some serious brain damage, it definitely plays effects into your next or upcoming fights.
yeah, and I think Marlon Moraes at 135. I think he's a perfect example of that, where
Yeah.
he got stopped with that hook kick by Corey Sandhagen. And then, 2 months later, he's back in there against Rob Font and gets wobbled with a jab. I think a lot of guys don't take that time. If I'm not mistaken, he came back, and I think he might have lost his comeback fight by decision, but he's won one since then,
Hmm.
and I think he's good enough and has good enough coaches to where he could really go somewhere. So you've got a guy that maybe isn't as naturally talented in Ricky. That's really a tough, scrappy guy and a fan favorite, kind of in the Nate Diaz vein. And then you've got a guy like Ayman Zahabi, who is more of a naturally talented guy at a really good gym. His brother's one of the best MMA coaches out there. I think this one will be an entertaining fight. I don't think Zahabi is that much better than Ricky to be able to just completely control it the whole time. I do think it's going to be a bit back and forth. I just think Eamon's got more experience. I'm not too familiar with where Ricky trains out of, but it's hard to imagine it's a better gym than TriStar. And I think, especially after that knockout, the same thing happened with Fiziev, who's in the main event, where his debut in the UFC, even being a kickboxer, he just got caught with a good spinning back kick and went down and got finished. And I believe that's either his only MMA loss or one of two. And there's a lot of guys that have come into the UFC, got caught with a crazy spin move or a big shot. Even Islam Makachev. Got caught with a good shot in one of his first fights, and then they kind of figure it out. They're a little more careful, perhaps, and I think that's the case with Zahabi. So I do see him beating Ricky, but I think it's going to be a close fight. Ricky is scrappy enough and mixes it up well enough to where he's going to make it tough. I just think Zahabi's a little bit cleaner, a little bit more skilled, a little bit more experienced. Ricky does have a couple more fights on his record, but Zahabi's got more in the UFC. That's why I'm leaning towards him. But another fight, I think is, pretty close to 50-50, maybe 55-45, and that's what makes these uh, fights really good. Is the ones that are harder to guess tend to be the more exciting ones, whereas the ones like Adesanya and Cannonier, where you can kind of easily guess what happens, tend to not be knockdown dragouts.
Right. Yeah. Who's next, Travis?
Well, then we will be starting the main card, which will be Michael Johnson versus Jamie Malarkey. Michael Johnson, 21-17, but like was the case with Courtney Casey and guys like Nate Diaz, who oddly enough Michael Johnson has fought. We know when you've been in the UFC for a really long time, it's easy to have kind of a 50-50 record. Michael Johnson, just to name some of the guys he's fought, Khabib, he's fought Gaethje,
Wow.
uh, he's beaten Tony Ferguson and knocked out Dustin Poirier.
What? He
Yeah,
sounds like a
and
bad man, bro.
and if you look at his record, it's saying he beat Edson Barbosa, who's a really good kickboxer.
Wow. He beat Edson Barboza too, huh?
Yeah, he even went down to 145 for a while. I will say he had a tough time down there. He won the first round against Thiago Moises, and then got heel hooked. He fought Josh Emmett, who just beat Calvin Kattar a week or two ago and got knocked out really bad. Obviously, most people will remember him from his fight with Khabib, where he was on the bottom getting controlled, and Khabib was talking to him and telling him he needed to fight for the title. Um, that famous post-fight speech that Nate Diaz gave, where he said, "Conor McGregor, you're taking everything I work for, motherfucker. I want to fight you." Nate Diaz gave that speech after coming back off a layoff and beating Michael Johnson.
Dang, copy them, huh?
Yeah, so Michael Johnson's really been around, really fought everybody at 155. However, even though Jamie Malarkey is Australian and came up through that circuit, he's quite experienced himself. His last fight was a loss to Turner, who beat Riddell last week. However, before that, he had a couple impressive back-to-back wins, one of which over Kama Worthy, who's a really explosive fighter and a really good fighter. Malarkey, on his way to the UFC, had to fight Volkanovski in Australia in the regionals.
What?
Yeah, and got knocked out with a punch. I believe that was at 155.
Wow.
And then one of his first fights in the UFC was Brad Riddell.
Yeah, how'd you do
So
up against Brad?
yeah, so he's had kind of a tough time.
Yeah.
Within 2 fights in the UFC, if you've already fought the Tiger Muay Thai kickboxing coach and fought the featherweight champ,
Yeah.
chances are you're having kind of a tough time. And then his last one, he fights Jalen Turner, who of course just beat Riddell.
Man.
And but he is pretty experienced. Obviously, if you're fighting Volkanovski in the regionals, and is pretty explosive. Like I said, has some good wins. Johnson is definitely more experienced. Johnson, real basic game. It's really ones and twos. What makes it tricky is that he's got decent footwork, good power, and he's a southpaw.
Mm,
Michael Johnson, for a long time, has trained at Sanford MMA with Michael Chandler,
right.
Kamaru Usman, Gilbert Burns. I've seen a couple of videos on the internet where Michael Johnson was having some pretty heated sparring with Kamaru Usman.
That's
And
scary.
so, yeah, it's one of those ones though that I think it unless Malarkey has a really tough time with southpaws, I kind of think he gets this one, especially since Michael Johnson is like the opposite of Nate Diaz. He's a guy that like a lot of the times he's been finished,
Mm-hmm.
by Moises and stuff. He comes out and wins the first round and puts on like a southpaw boxing clinic, and then he just gets caught with something. Kind of like he did against Emmett, kind of like he did against Moises.
Right.
Definitely a real even fight, but I think one that Malarkey could take as long as he just stays patient, stays smart. But by no means would be shocked if Johnson got it. He was on a bit of a tough streak, but did win his last fight by knockout, and has gone back up to 155, which I think was a good idea. So I think Malarkey's got this, but I think Johnson puts up a tough fight.
Mm.
Um, that brings us to our final female fight of the night, which is also at 125. It's Cynthia Calvillo and Nina Nunes, who used to be Nina Ansaroff, and of course is married to Amanda Nunes.
Whoa,
Uh,
what? That's her wife?
yeah, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah,
Man.
we've got a lot of weird connections on this card. Brothers of coaches, wives of
Yeah.
champions.
How crazy. I had no idea.
Yeah, unfortunately, I will say, while she's good, and of course, like most women fighters that you see with her record, like 10-7, I think her third fight, she was fighting women that are in the UFC now. So, her record definitely is more about her competition and not so much about her skill.
Right.
Uh, Calvillo, however, even though she lost to Casey Calvert, who fights earlier on the card, Calvillo's been on a pretty good stretch lately, and you can tell is definitely trying to make a push towards getting a shot with Shevchenko. Um, Also, you got to think Nina Nunes had the baby recently,
Yep.
and so I hate to say it, even with her level of competition, I just think between that and the toll that must take on your body,
Mm-hmm.
and Calvillo kind of being more the up and comer and surging, I see Calvillo kind of taking this one. But like a lot of the women's fights in the top 10, I see it being really close, and I wouldn't even be shocked if you got a split decision or 2 rounds one way, 1 round the other. Um, that brings us to the lone heavyweight fight on the card, which is Chase Sherman versus Jared Vandera. Chase Sherman, of course, is a little bit more profile. I believe he's had a couple more fights in the UFC. Jared's been in the UFC for a little bit. He had kind of a tough time. Aside from a win that he had over Justin Tafa, he's lost to Romanov and Sergey Spivak, both by a KO. And last year he had 2 fights. One where he got out decision by Andrei Arlovsky, the former champ, when he was on that streak. Also got subbed by Alexei Oleinik. I think he got caught with that weird Ezekiel choke that Oleinik does from the bottom. And so, not really what you want to be known for. Chase Sherman also lost to Romanov, lost to Collier, lost to Parker Porter, also lost to Arlovsky. He has gotten some good KOs and TKOs, but he's another guy that, a lot of his losses have been coming in the UFC in the last couple of years. So I think I'm not necessarily saying that the guy that loses is out of the UFC, but with both of them being fairly close to 50-50 records, and both of them have only had one win between the two of them, I think, in the last 3 years. Definitely a fight that's important to win for either guy. Um, I, I think I'm going to lean towards Sherman, even though he's also lost to pretty much the same guys. Arlovsky and Romanov and these guys. I think Sherman just looked a little better. I think he's a little bit more explosive. He's won a little bit more of his fights. He's actually got a couple wins in the UFC, whereas I don't think Jared actually has one yet. But that's one, I could see being good for a little bit and perhaps getting kind of sloppy unless one guy gets a finish. The cool thing is they both do have some finishes on their record and have both been put away a lot. So I think it's a fight that hopefully won't go the distance. That brings us to a bantamweight fight between Douglas Silva de Andrade and Said Nurmagomedov. I don't know Said Nurmagomedov's relation to Khabib. I don't know if he's a cousin or a brother like Umar is, but I know he's closely related with him, trains with him, also from Dagestan. Um, Not as experienced in the UFC, but is definitely coming from the Caucasus regions, has had some pretty high level of competition. What he does have is a 7-year age advantage. Douglas,
Is that really an advantage? 7 years?
yeah, yeah.
Uh,
When it's 30 and 37, it
oh,
is.
okay. Yeah.
Only because like he's only had a couple of fights in the UFC, whereas Douglas Silva de Andrade is really got some miles on him. He's kind of, I feel for him. He's got that Francisco Trinaldo thing where it's like you're a Brazilian dude, you're in your mid-30s, almost 40, you don't really speak any English, you've had 15 fights or 10 fights in the UFC, but nobody really knows you, so like it's going to be almost impossible for you to get a title shot.
Right.
To give you guys an idea, he got submitted by Rob Font. He lost corner stoppage after the second round when he fought Peter Yan. Then he fought Marlon Cheeto Vera a couple months later and beat Cheeto Vera. He beat Henan Barao in 2019, who of course was the former champ at 135. Since then, he's lost to Lerone Murphy, beat Gaetano Pirello. So he definitely struggled at the higher level, but has got some good wins. His record. Saeed's only 15-2. Douglas Silva de Andrade's 28-4. He's really good. He's just a guy that, unlike, he's like the opposite of O'Malley. as far as the promotional thing. He's not
Right.
a guy that's ever gone viral or ever had a soundbite. Probably doesn't even speak English. Um, I will say though, I think his weakness is kind of Nurmagomedov. It's why they wanted Islam to fight Rafael Dos Anjos, who's in the main event now, where Silva Andrade's really well-rounded, but Saeed's wrestling should be able to take it on the ground. And I don't think he's going to hurt Andrade on the feet, but I think he's good enough to hang in there. The one thing I will say about De Andrade is I don't know if he's on some type of steroid or something, but for 135, he's like a 135 Vitor Belfort. I mean, the dude is shredded.
I don't know what he's on, bro, but I want to be on it too, huh?
Bro, and I'm telling you, he will be coming with some heavy punches.
I believe it, man.
Yeah, it should make him easy for Said Nurmagomedov to take him down, just with the way he swings, but definitely one that you don't want to be there for. And unlike his brother, Said Nurmagomedov's already got a couple of losses, and so I would definitely be keeping my hands up and shooting that low single real quick because
Yeah.
is dangerous. There's a reason that with nobody knowing him, he's been in the UFC for more than half a decade and has fought all these top names.
Right.
Um, I will say though, I think it's one that if it goes to a decision, probably gets given to Nurmagomedov because the name recognition. Obviously, he's on his way up. Um, the only one I can say that I saw from that I was really impressed by was his last fight. Even though he's gotten a KO, in his last fight he got a quick submission over Cody Stamen, which I believe was a guillotine choke. And Stamen's
Nice.
been in the top 10 for a long time. And so that was a pretty impressive win. I don't know if that's going to be as easy to do on Silva de Andrade, but I do think momentum, if nothing else, is on Nurmagomedov's side. So I'm going to go with the man from Dagestan on this. But again, Silva de Andrade is one of those Brazilian guys that, like Chito Vera knows, he's stopped a lot of guys that were supposed to shoot up to the top. So it'll also be a good test. If Nurmagomedov beats him, it shows he's ready for some of the better guys in that weight class, which is weird because Umar Nurmagomedov also fights in that weight class. So I don't know how that's going to work down the road, but hopefully they can avoid having to fight each other being in the same camp and same family and stuff.
Nothing but family conflicts, bro. Amanda Nunez, her wife, Valentina Shevcheno and her
Yeah.
sister, and now all the Numar blah blah blahs, Numagada.
Nurmagomedov.
I can't speak Spanish, but I feel like I still have the accent sometimes.
I hear that, bro.
All right, who's the co-main event for this fight?
Well, this is the weird thing, and I didn't understand this either. The fight is Armin Petrosian, who is 7-1 between I believe it's Cow. I'm not
Hmm.
sure how to pronounce that Brazilian name. Barallo. Armin is 7-1. Barallo is 11-1. They both have good records, and obviously, like we said earlier, middleweight's not a super deep division. That's why there's guys that are 4-1 that are in the UFC. What is strange to me is that there are other fighters on this, like Nurmagomedov and like Cynthia Calvallo and even Shevchenko, that have a little bit more name recognition. Whereas each of these fighters only have one fight in the UFC apiece, from what I
Huh.
can tell. Barallo did win his against a 13-1 Gadzi Omargazayev. And Armin Petrosian won his against, I think it was Gregory Rodriguez, who is a real tough, hard-hitting middleweight. So they're both good and have Gregory Rodriguez, who both have good records and have both had a good win so far. But even though this is a fight night after a big pay-per-view, to have one fight in the UFC and immediately be the co-main event, I thought was kind of strange.
Kind of silly, yeah.
I will say, even though I was a little bit more impressed with Armin Petrosian's win, Barallo, oddly enough, I have heard of before. I heard a lot of impressive stuff about training with this guy. As far as Brazilian guys at middleweight go, aside from Alex Pereira, he was a guy that had a good amount of hype coming in. I believe his nickname is The Natural or something like that. So I think they're putting him in this co-main event. I think there's something I'm missing. I think they're expecting one of these guys, and I think it's the Brazilian Barallo to be really impressive and maybe get some type of highlight. Either way, both guys have an impressive record, and especially winning this one would have to move him up in middleweight, where Adesanya's fought everybody in the top 5. And once that Pereira and Adesanya trilogy concludes, they're definitely going to be looking for new blood. And I don't know, even though I was much more impressed with Petrosian's win, that makes me want to lean towards him. Just some of the stuff I've heard about Barallo, I definitely am not underestimating him. I've got to, just from what I've seen, I'm going to go with Petrosian, but I get the feeling that I'm missing something on Barallo. So I definitely think he's one to watch for having a real low-profile fight and being in this co-main event. I think this one could be real exciting.
Nice.
Yeah, that's going to bring us to our main event, which of course is the Battle of the Rafaels. We have Rafael Fiziev versus Rafael Dos Anjos. Of course, Fiziev is quite the fan favorite due to him having some of the nastiest Muay Thai in MMA, not just offensively, where he's got some of the nastiest body kicks that you'll see and some real crisp punches and stuff. It's funny because Dos Anjos' last fight was against Renato Moicano, and if you remember, Fiziev knocked him out with a real nice combo. I believe it was a left hook to the body, a right straight, and then a left hook up top. Also, in his last fight, he fought Brad Riddell, which was the fight of the 2 back-to-back Tiger Muay Thai kickboxing coaches. And the fight was pretty even, and then Fiziev landed a nasty spinning hook kick, which I'd seen him get a knockout with in kickboxing also. So real all-action fighter, real exciting, real nasty body kicks. Also, almost Lurdzilla-like with his body slips. Like I've seen him slip not just head kicks, but shots that look like they were going to the body. He's definitely got that Matrix lean back at the waist thing down. For a short, stocky guy, I found that kind of impressive.
Well, I'm sold. I'm betting on him. I don't know him that well, but I'm betting on him. If he moves like Lurdzilla, that's all I need to know.
Yeah. What I will say is Rafael Dos Anjos, who he's fighting, not only had a fairly recent stint up at welterweight for a while, but has fought just about everybody. Obviously, he used to be the champion at 155 when Anthony Pettis won the belt back in the day. His first title defense, he guillotine choked Gilbert Melendez. His second title defense was against Rafael Dos Anjos. Not many people gave the southpaw Dos Anjos a chance, and Dos Anjos just beat the brakes off Pettis for 5 rounds. A lot of people think that that's what changed for Pettis and that he just wasn't the same after that fight.
Uh-huh.
Also, if you remember, when Conor was first going up to 155, Rafael Dos Anjos is who he was supposed to fight.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and then Rafael Dos Anjos broke his foot, and Nate Diaz filled in.
Oh, man.
So actually, Rafael Dos Anjos breaking his foot is the reason we got the Diaz versus McGregor fights, which were really good. Dos
A
Anjos,
blessing in disguise.
yeah, unfortunately, in his first title defense, or his second one maybe, Dos Anjos lost the belt immediately to Eddie Alvarez, and of course, in his first title defense, Eddie Alvarez got knocked out by Conor McGregor. So Rafael Dos Anjos just barely missed getting that Conor McGregor fight. He did have some tough losses up at welterweight. Recently, he has beat Paul Felder and Renato Moicano, which is good. But he lost to Kevin Lee. He beat Kevin Lee, He lost to Leon Edwards. He lost to Michael Chiesa. Check this out. In 2018, he had 2 5-round main event fights. One was a co-main event against Colby Covington where he lost. Then after that, he lost a 5-round decision main event to Kamaru Usman.
Jeez, poor guy.
So yeah, and the year before that, he had submitted Neil Magny and won a 5-round decision in a main event against Robbie Lawler. He also lost a 5-round fight to Tony Ferguson. I know he's fought Cowboy at least once. Dos Anjos also beat Benson Henderson, who was a longtime champion and was the one that Pettis got the belt from. Dos Anjos even had went the distance with Khabib in a 3-round fight a handful of years back.
Oh wow.
So yeah, so Rafael Dos Anjos, not only was a champion, but really fought everybody, and not just all the good fighters at 155, but then fought Chiesa, fought Robbie Lawler, fought Usman, fought Covington, fought half of the top guys up at 170. So he's been back down at lightweight, which I know is a tough cut for him, but I think is a better one. This fight was supposed to happen quite some time ago. It was supposed to happen back in February. I believe Fiziev got COVID, if I'm not mistaken. Dos Anjos ended up doing the main event with Moicano, which I kind of thought Moicano would take, but Dos Anjos proved to be too experienced. I will say, I think Dos Anjos being a southpaw could be a little bit of an issue. Fiziev has been finishing everybody and knocking them out. However, they've mostly been right-handed like him. His last fight where he fought Bobby Green, who's obviously a very different fighter to Dos Anjos, Fiziev did seem to have a hard time because he really likes that left body kick, and that's just a weird one to throw against a southpaw. Usually, if you're right-handed and your opponent's southpaw, you're looking for that right body kick. So I still think Fiziev is the much better striker, and definitely much more fresh, but less experienced. And Dos Anjos hits hard and is real durable, and is a better striker than most people give him credit for. Obviously, more of a takedown and ground guy, definitely more of a mix-it-up type. It had enough strength to hang in there and make it the distance with Covington and Usman. Covington, of course, gave Rafael Dos Anjos the nickname of Rafael Dos Nachos, which was pretty funny.
Those nachos.
Yeah, and this is another one where, I'm kind of torn on it. I feel like it's a little bit of O'Malley versus Munoz, where you've got a guy like Fiziev that, there is the up-and-comer, much less experienced in the sport. They want him to come out there and get a knockout, and there's a good chance of that happening. But then on the other side, like Munoz, you've got Rafael Dos Anjos, who is this tough, gritty Brazilian that's just been around forever, rarely gets finished by anybody. Went the distance with Khabib and Usman and Lawler and Covington. Not a guy you see getting finished a whole lot. And Fiziev, with the way he swings those punches and kicks, he does get tired. And while Dos Anjos has done 5-round fights with a couple of Hall of Fame champions, Rafael Fiziev has never been in a 5-round fight.
Oh boy. Hopefully you don't
Yeah,
get tired.
yeah. I see him probably lighting Dos Anjos up in the first couple of rounds. Unfortunately, I think if not in the first couple rounds, by round 3 or 4, if he can't put Dos Anjos away, which nobody else has really been able to do, I think Dos Anjos starts landing a couple shots just enough to get in on a body lock. And I know they do have good wrestling at Tiger Muay Thai, but I just feel like a guy coming down from 170 against a kickboxer, once this starts getting into the cage work and the clinches and the body locks and the takedowns and hitting you when you come up, he's definitely not Khabib or Usman, but Dos Anjos is a pretty imposing guy strength-wise and grappling, and and not the slickest guy, but like I said, he basically beat Anthony Pettis, 6 or 7 years ago in a kickboxing match, and like him being southpaw was a big part. But he does have a really good left body kick, which Fiziev is going to be open for. He does have a really good left overhand, which I've seen him break a lot of guys' orbital bones with.
Ouch.
Uh, yeah, the first UFC card me and Trevor ever ordered, 10 years ago or more. The first fight, the first fight of the night was Jeremy Stevens breaking Rafael Dos Anjos' jaw. That's how long this dude has been around.
Ouch, bro. That's a long time.
Yeah, so I hate to say it, but while I'm rooting for Rafael Fiziev to like slip that body kick like Lordzilla and throw a big punch combination like he got on Moicano, or perhaps a good spinning hook kick like he got on Riddell, I think he maybe comes away with the first couple of rounds if he can avoid that body lock. But I think Dos Anjos is going to be a little bit too durable. I think he's still going to be around in round 3 or 4. And those big hooks and those big kicks that Fiziev throws, I think, are going to tire him out just enough. I don't necessarily see Dos Anjos putting him away. I think if there's a finish, it's Fiziev catching him with a big shot. But I hate to say it, I'm kind of slightly leaning towards Dos Anjos coming away with a kind of a 3-2, 4-1 unanimous decision. I think the 5 rounds against a guy this experienced is just going to be really tough. But like I say, I wouldn't only be shocked if Fiziev won, but I'm definitely rooting for him.
Yeah. So that's who you're going for this fight, huh? Fiziev
Yeah, yeah, and I
or
got.
or Dos Anjos.
No, I think I'm gonna bet on Fiziev because I get the feeling he's the underdog, but I'm not putting a lot on it. I think I'm
Right.
gonna leave. I think I'm gonna leave that one off my parlay, or maybe do a couple that have the fight going past 2.5. Maybe one with Dos Anjos winning. I just if there's a gun to my head, I think I'm gonna go with Dos Anjos. Like
There's a
my heart
guns here.
wants Fiziev to win,
Yeah.
but I just don't know if he can.
Right. Definitely a hard one to call, but should be a good fight.
Yeah. So for any of our gamblers out there, I will say this is not the best card for this. I've got a lot that I'm not only not sure of who wins. A lot of these I could see being finishes, or I could see kind of going the distance. If I had to make a parlay for this, I think I would have David Onama taking that featherweight fight against Garrett Armfield. Um, I think I would have the Antonina versus Casey fight going 1.5. If that's offered on your betting site, if the choice is for it to go to a decision, I think that's a fairly safe bet. And to add another one on there, I'm going to go with Cynthia Calvillo. I think she's just going to be a little bit too much for Nina Nunes. And aside from that, if those odds aren't good enough for you, you need a little bit more. I would pick between De Andrade and Nurmagomedov in the over, or I would pick Dos Anjos and Fiziev, either for it to go past the halfway point or for Dos Anjos to win. But I would advise not getting greedy and just going with the first 3 that I gave you guys. Like I say, there's some cards that just got a bunch of fights, where we can get a 4 or 5 pick parlay like Lewis posted in our last video. And there's some like this where, the fights are so even, it's really anybody's guess. The cool thing is just those couple should be enough to at least get double or triple your money.
Yeah, you heard the man. I don't know shit about this week's fights, but I'm definitely going to be siding with Travis for sure. He's proved himself time and time again. Like you said, it's probably not going to be the best week for betting, but we'll probably get lucky. And by we, I mean him. And I'm saying we because I'll probably be betting anyways.
Yeah. I'm definitely gonna throw a parlay down for the hell of it, but I definitely none of these do I have that Volkanovski, Adesanya,
Right.
Pereira confidence that
Confidence.
I had last week.
Yeah. Well, that about wraps it up for this podcast, huh?
Yes, sir, it does.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us on the fights tonight. Make sure you hit that like and subscribe button for more future.
Breakdowns and betting picks.
There we go, betting picks. That was the word I was looking for. And hit the link below to make your betting site. All right. This is Big Dog Louie and Mr. Travis Dunsubmittable, and we are out.